Let's start. Okay, guys, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, we have a very special guest. My God, my English. It is Derek Yo from Moonbeam, founder of Moonbeam. Derek, welcome to the show. We spoke before, maybe during last summer or so. We didn't do a show though, so it's very nice to finally be doing a show with you. So please tell us who you are yourself and what you guys are doing. What is Moonbeam, and what can people expect soon from Moonbeam?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Evan, for having me on the show here. And yeah, so I'm as you said, I'm Derek Yu. We've been working on the project Moonbeam for some time now. Many people may actually be familiar with. We actually have there's two networks that we've been working on. The other network is called Moon River, and that's been launched now for a couple months. Then we're kind of heading now into this kind of launch kind of like season for Polkadot parachains. So that's been anticipated, but a long time coming, and we're finally kind of at the starting point for that process. So that's kicking off shortly, and I think there's we've been kind of focusing a lot of energy on that.
And the reason why we talk is because also you guys are one of the key projects on Polkadot. I mean, when people think about Polkadot, Moonbeam is absolutely one of the top projects you always think about that is launching. And what you guys do is basically Ethereum EVM machine that people can take smart contracts from Ethereum, they can run it on Polkadot. Is that correct? How would you yourself describe the mission of Moonbeam in the Polkadot ecosystem?
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a little bit of context just so people understand kind of how we kind of arrived like where we did. But I think one of the original ideas and kind of beliefs that we had even back in 2019 when we started was that we're heading into this permanently multi-chain kind of environment. There's going to be many blockchains that have users and value on them. I think even more maybe than there are today. So that was the premise, and I think when you have that idea in mind, you realize that the connectivity between like different chains becomes kind of a critical piece, a critical capability. And that's kind of what led us to Polkadot in the first place, right? Because I think Polkadot has that kind of vision of there being many blockchains. It has this kind of solution they're providing for how to connect or how these different blockchains can communicate with each other. So that was a good fit for us. So I think we started building in this Polkadot environment, but I think what we realized then is in Polkadot you have this framework called Substrate. So you can build your own blockchain basically using Substrate. It's a very powerful kind of framework for doing that. But I think what we realized is that wasn't going to necessarily be a great fit, for every use case, right? So like you have this powerful framework to build your own blockchain, but you're still building your own blockchain. So you still,
Yes.
there's, you have to, figure out like the underlying token economy, nodes, and there's a lot of kind of infrastructural kind of things you have to worry about. And so I think what we realized is, hey, there's going to be an important spot in this ecosystem to provide more of a smart contract-like capability that that a lot of developers are familiar with. And so that's what led us into that idea. And then I think even within that idea, we said, we're called kind of pragmatists here, where we said like the thing that is kind of the most widely adopted and that's going to have the least friction would be to do an Ethereum style implementation, right? So to be able so that people can use the Ethereum like developer tools and a lot of infrastructure that's compatible with the EVM. And so that led us down this path of creating kind of in partnership with Parity actually, where we've worked on this. Let's call it an Ethereum implementation in Substrate. So we're using the Polkadot like blockchain building framework, but we basically have done an implementation of Ethereum so that if you go on to either Moon River or soon to be Moonbeam, it kind of looks and feels like an Ethereum like system.
And there are so many tools built on Ethereum right now. We also build tools with Moralis that, indexing the blockchain, getting all the smart contracts in real time, all the events, all the user balances, all the user NFTs, all of that. There is a lot of infrastructure. We know it firsthand, what it takes to build that out. And that's why I totally agree. It makes perfect sense to have a system developer's origin node, because there are so many tools, all of these different small utilities. For example, there is this company I follow, Tenderly, where you can debug smart contracts. There are different other providers for different things. So that's why Solidity now, it's kind of like JavaScript of crypto in terms that there are many JavaScript virtual machines. It's been a long history, but we still use it. We still use it today, and maybe that's gonna be the future of Solidity EVM. How do you see it? Do you think that in 20 years we're still gonna use it, or will it be maybe Rust, what Solana is doing?
I mean, are there going to be new innovations? I'm sure, but I do think that at this point, there's just a huge stickiness like into this like Ethereum
Yes.
technology stack. And I mean, the story, I've heard before is like, think about this. There's the story of this x86, right? So Intel made this like x86 standard. It was supposed to be this kind of temporary thing that wouldn't,
Yeah.
that it wasn't going to have any successors. But then you realize once you have this ecosystem of like technologies, companies that are building on that, and here you are like 40 years later, and people are still kind of that's still kind of the dominant architecture. So I do think that if you had to pick any one technology standard that is has that kind of staying power right now, it is this set of technologies around the Ethereum tech stack. So.
And you look even at more recent example, the web. To build a website, I need HTML. Then suddenly I need CSS, a completely different thing, completely new language I have to understand. Then I need to learn JavaScript also to make it interactive. Then I need to learn something like, C# or PHP in the past. At least now we have Node.js, but to do backend. So it's basically like 4 different things I need to know just to build something that is a kind of like a website on the internet. Is this the ideal way to build websites? I mean, if we would restart internet today, probably we would have a much better way. But this is the same thing in crypto. That is Solidity the best way? EVM the best way? Probably not. But it's the momentum, is the tools, developer adoption, and so on and so forth.
I think people but what I can see is I think people tend to underestimate just what it takes to build all of these like infrastructural elements. So and people don't think of it, right? So you might have a smart contract programming language that has benefits, security features, other things that are better than Solidity maybe, but it's just like wallet support, like all infrastructure like Moralis,
Yes.
like you were saying. There's just so much that's been built, and I think that just takes a long time to like rebuild. So I think this is where L1s that are offering like a different tech stack, I mean, there are going to be some kind of winners there too, but it just takes like a while for all of those like tools to kind of mature and develop.
And so one of the things that we have been looking at when it comes to Moonbeam and Moonriver is which one should we focus on? Because we will integrate Moonbeam 100%. But we're looking at Moonriver and we're like, should we integrate this or not? Because like, is this for long term or not? When we integrate, we want to be sure that, this is the thing. And that's also why I asked you guys in Telegram, is Moonriver, is it the thing? But you said also yes, because there's a lot of value there. And I'm a bit annoyed with Kusama always because, I mean, everyone says, oh, we're on Kusama now, we're going to go to Polkadot soon, like this is the big thing. But then it's not a testnet because it has value. So it's always like this somehow gray area kind of testnet, but also not testnet. So how do you view that? Moonriver, will it be a secondary citizen, or will it be like an equal sibling to to Moonbeam?
I see it as like, I mean, I think sibling is the right word. I think it's like the little brother, right? So in some ways. So I think that like, it's its own person, it's its own thing. It may be good at like certain things that the older brother isn't good at, but and it will have less value. I mean, I think that, if you look at the relay chain asset itself, KSM versus DOT, there's obviously a value difference. So, I mean, this is where it's clear that if you want kind of the maximum economic security, then Polkadot is like what makes sense. But, I think we've been talking, teams that have different kinds of use cases, they may not necessarily need like maximum economic security. They may want, cheaper transactions or, cheaper block space. So, that's where Kusama like, could be a fit. And basically what I see, there's some more things I would mention here that there was the original idea behind Kusama, which was, I think, a little bit more in this like testnet direction, at least, even if it was value bearing.
Yeah.
But I've seen that narrative has shifted over time, right? And this is as like, once you launch these networks, they kind of take on a life of their own. They form their own communities, and so I see it as that narrative is becoming less and less, basically, that hey, this is a testnet. Because you really see like a very engaged community like around the network, and then we're starting to see now teams that are saying, our final deployment destination is Kusama. It's not that it's there and that's a stepping stone to get to Polkadot. So like
I've heard that also. Exactly, I've heard that also, that many teams are saying that. Some of them, like you say, it is because they need faster transactions, but some of them also, maybe we will not get a slot in Polkadot, so we're gonna go to Kusama. It's easier to get a slot. So probably there is a world where both exist, and we're gonna follow developments closely. And when it comes to tech, you say that it's implementation of Ethereum on Polkadot, and I also know that there are some special additional things that like some native like connections between parachains, or what is it that is beyond just the EVM that is there?
So I mean, I think that there's a bunch of kind of things that we get like as being part of a substrate chain, basically, but implemented with Substrate. Substrate has like a lot of different like palettes and other kinds of advanced functions. So if you look at Moonriver as an example, there's this base Ethereum feature set, but then there's a full on-chain governance system. That's something that obviously isn't isn't present on ETH mainnet. There's also a full staking system that helps select like these collators, which are the block producers in the system. It helps provide security. So there's definitely a number of other elements that are on the chain that are not part of a vanilla just Ethereum implementation. And so that's something that we get from using Substrate. But the thing that I'd say that if you ask me what is the one reason why we chose to kind of build on Polkadot, it's really because of this this built-in I call it a built-in networking capability, right? This built-in cross-chain integration capability. The main protocol that helps you do that is something called XCMP. And so XCMP is basically a way for chains to communicate with each other that are part of this either Kusama or Polkadot ecosystem. And this is all I'd say that it's right at the very beginning of this, right? So this standard is just kind of being has kind of just been stabilized now, and we're just going to be shipping the first features based on XCMP shortly. And the thing that's unique about it is that it's built into the base kind of protocol itself. A lot of the bridging solutions these days, so obviously there's many chains and people are there's all this activity in the bridging space now. You tend to have this thing where their security assumptions are layered on top of the base layer. So you have base layer protocols, and then you have some other bridging protocol that's layering on top. So I think this is definitely a unique advantage where on Kusama and Polkadot, it's built into the base layer, so you don't have any additional security assumptions. So I'll give you some examples. I mean, we're going to be shipping shortly here the first of our token based integrations. So that's an ability for users on Kusama to be able to move KSM tokens from the Kusama relay chain onto Moonriver. When they come to Moonriver, they'll be represented there as kind of an ERC20 compatible token. So then they can be used inside of all these DeFi protocols that are that have deployed there. And then you can also you can move it back, and so that's all happening with this XCMP.
But so on a more technical level, so there are all these different parachains. Some parachains have EVM, some parachains don't have EVM, but there is, like you say, there is a standard way of moving assets back and forth. And so how does it work then? Let's say I have my own virtual machine, maybe, Ivan virtual machine I invented myself. And you have EVM, and you send some assets across, how do I take it from this low level bridge solution that Substrate has into my EVM that I represented as ERC20 token? Do you understand? Do you understand? Because you have EVM, someone else doesn't. So how does it work? How do you fetch these assets from low level into more high level?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of this, XCMP and, these tokens that I'm talking about that are moving are represented kind of at this lower substrate layer. So you have you need to choose actually where you're going to represent the tokens. There's a couple of choices there. There's we're using this palette assets is what we're using. There are a couple other palettes that people have been using for this. And then, these XCMP messages are basically at the substrate layer are basically, managing then balances of tokens that are kind of natively stored in the chain. What I'd say is for our implementation, a couple points. One is that, we've gone to great lengths to kind of provide compatibility. So when you have an Ethereum account balance and you're querying it with the Ethereum APIs, it actually is reading into this substrate storage, right? So you kind of we've mapped basically the storage into this into the substrate layer.
But is it represented like a smart contract, or because in Ethereum you either have an address that is user or smart contract that holds the assets. So if the assets are in substrate, is it abstracted as a contract, or how does it work?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, our strategy for basically extending the base Ethereum feature set to give access to these more advanced substrate functions is via precompiles. So we have a bunch of them already, and there's a bunch more planned where so we have these precompiles. So there's, for example, there's this KSM precompile as an example. It has it conforms to the ERC20 interface, so it can be treated as an ERC20. But really, when you're invoking functions, let's say you're invoking the transfer function to transfer KSM back to the relay chain, that's actually kind of reaching down to the substrate layer and then invoking these XCMP based functions to perform the cross chain actions.
Very interesting.
So the reason we did that, I mean, you have different we did it because that way it maintains compatibility with all of the existing Ethereum tooling, right? Because then all these things just look like smart contracts and you can interact with them that way. versus us creating, extensions to the RPCs or other things where the tools wouldn't be aware or understand how to use those.
Got it. Yeah, that's super interesting, and especially how we evolve. That we have more powerful things, but we can still express it as an EVM, and we can still make abstractions that everything works. So that's very exciting. And what kind of features and use cases do you see on Polkadot coming along? I mean, of course, we have the infrastructure like you guys. Do you have already projects committed to move from like Ethereum, Binance Chain, or expand to Moonbeam? How is the community doing?
Yeah, and I'd say here that the exciting thing is basically that we have a bunch of activity that's happened since we launched the first of these two networks, Moonriver on Kusama. As I mentioned, that was about 9 weeks ago, but there's already been quite a bit of activity with teams deploying. And I guess to describe the teams, I'd put them into two buckets. The one bucket, which actually is the people that we tend to kind of work with early on, with our own some of our own efforts, were I'd call them teams that were pursuing multi-chain deployment strategies. So, right, so you can have a team that maybe were originally from Ethereum, but then they've since kind of deployed maybe even to like Polygon, BSC, and to other chains. And I think when you have that kind of strategy, we're a little bit Moonbeam, I think, is a natural partner in a way, right? Because a lot of them are kind of targeting these EVM chains, and then it's like, okay, well, I want to get to Polkadot, and I can either do a substrate implementation, or if I work with Moonbeam, then I'm just leveraging my same like Ethereum implementation like yet again. So I think that's definitely one category of people. And for example, like one of our partners, Sushi, is like fits into this category. They have this like very broad
nice.
like multi-chain like deployment strategy. But the second category of teams, and this is something that I'm pretty encouraged by, are what I'd call native teams that are focusing just on Moonriver for the moment, and soon to be like Moonbeam once it launches. And that's where we've seen for every kind of team we talk to, there's these organic teams that are deploying DeFi protocol. I would say particularly DeFi, and in the NFT area, there's been in the last couple months, there's been quite a bit of activity on Moonriver. And kind of a community forming around the chain for people like launching what I call native projects, right? So not ones that are multi-chain.
Right, and I think the most important thing will be that to get adoption, people need to switch their MetaMask network. I mean, that's when we will see the big wave of users. That there needs to be some project, maybe Sushi, maybe something else, where people go there anyway, and they switch their MetaMask, because that's, I think, the number one metric all projects need to maximize. How many people have it in their how many people have their wallet configured so they're ready to use the network. And that's also why EVM systems have such a easy way in with many users, because MetaMask is already there. So that's going to be interesting to see how many people get actively involved and use it on a daily basis. So what are your views? Do you have some strategies, some events to get that going, the user adoption, or you think that the community will manage with the projects that are already lined up?
Well, we're getting like quite a bit of engagement on the network, but that doesn't mean that we kind of sit back. So there's definitely been a lot of like inbound interest from different teams. We're providing some technical support for folks that are deploying. We expect that to continue basically. Even in the like I said, in the last couple months, there's been many dozens of projects that I've deployed basically. And so I think the thing that we've been mostly focused on is providing the infrastructure that they need to be successful. And so I'll give you some examples, right? Like we got this feedback from teams saying like, okay, great, I want to deploy, but I need my front end relies on the graph, for example. So then we have an integration with the graph for Moonriver right now, where people can use that if they're wanting to provide like a performant like front ends. A lot of teams said, well, we're DeFi protocol, we have like a lot of like value at hand, so we can't just put that into like our regular address. We need like a multi-sig, like, so that
right.
That led then to us making sure there was an implementation of the Gnosis Safe like system, basically, like to help manage funds. And same goes with like oracles, for example. For lending and borrowing protocols, like they generally need oracles to to be deployed. So there's a band, for example, is like up and running, and we've been working closely with the Chainlink team to bring them online as well. That should be happening shortly. So these are the kinds of things I see us more as like we're preparing the environment, like making sure all the infrastructural kind of needs are taken care of. Another like top requested feature was like Etherscan, right? So it almost doesn't matter if you're an EVM chain and you don't have Etherscan, you can put whatever you want there. You're going to get a bunch of complaints from people being like, when is
yeah.
So that's something that was recently deployed, is kind of the Etherscan like implementation for Moonriver, and it'll be coming for Moonbeam as well. So I think we've just been trying to listen. We've like listened to our kind of customer, if you want to call it that, is these development teams. And so, I think half the game is just listening to like their feedback, what are their complaints, and then you try to like address whatever the complaints are, basically.
Well, I think you have a lot of different EVMs now across different chains. Avalanche has EVM, Phantom. There is now on Polkadot, there is going to be Moonbeam, but also other EVMs as well. So how do you think the Polkadot EVMs can compete with these other ones like Phantom, Binance Chain? Because speed, I don't think that speed is the variable here, because there are many EVMs that are fast even outside Polkadot. Do you think that is going to be this bridging, or what is the main value add for EVMs on Polkadot compared to other EVMs?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would say that it's the interoperability. I mean, that to me is the key. I mean, there is shared security too, which I think is important. So, as a parachain, you do get this benefit of once you bootstrap, as a parachain, you get kind of this like security as a service from like all these validators on the relay chain. So that is useful, because for a lot of chains, I think when they're just starting out, you kind of have to bootstrap up this validator set to like, create security. Whereas in the Polkadot system, you just, you kind of get it as a service. So I think that is important, but the most important thing for me is the interoperability. And I think that, that's something that like, if you're a standalone EVM chain, like yes, you can have bridges and other things, but that's never going to be as native or as good as having this built-in kind of networking and this ability to create specialized parachains, that can be that can be accessed basically. And so this is where, I mean, I don't know exactly all of what the future is going to look like, but there's some things that are clear to me, right? So I think almost all the protocols that exist today were kind of developed with this like monochain deployment in mind, right? So they kind of are self-contained onto one chain, and and then people are kind of copying like the implementation to many chains at this point. That's this kind of porting strategy is kind of what's happening. But I do think that almost all of these protocols need to get reimagined for what they should look like in like a natively multi-chain kind of version. And I think there's going to be like different protocols, maybe winners here, that are successfully able to do this. I think that Polkadot has like a lot of these primitives like in place that like aren't the case on other chains. So for example, like even simple example for one of these DeFi protocols is deploying to many chains. Well, their liquidity gets like split on these different chains. Obviously there's an obvious thing there is like, well, how can I leverage liquidity that's on one chain for some actions happening on another chain? That's kind of unsolved still, I think, largely, right? So so these are the kinds of problems I think that the Polkadot infrastructure like provides like a good like basis for for building something that's like natively multi-chain, an app that might kind of have different functions that are kind of being performed on different specialized chains.
Yeah, and like you say, the split of liquidity is the biggest issue. You can have layer 2s, you can have transactions per second, all of that is great, but liquidity is split. So, for example, Uniswap, they launch on a new scaling solution, but it's like tumbleweed, In many cases, it's completely empty because all the liquidity is somewhere else, and there is almost no reason to trade on these scaling solutions if liquidity is not there. And of course, if Polkadot can come and say, hey, all liquidity is shared, some chains will be more for speed, some chains will be more for security, some chains will be for something else, but liquidity is all the same ever. So that's definitely a game changer. But do you think that the number of parachains is an issue? How many parachains can there be on Polkadot? Because that's kind of a limiting factor. I mean, yes, it's all liquidity, but it's like 12 or 10. How many is there, Derek? Do you think it's a problem? Yeah.
Well, so I think that like the initial capacity of the system is envisioned to be 100. So on the base like relay chain is 100. So I think that's that will keep that will kind of hold things for like quite for some time, but you still will need more than that ultimately. The plan that I've heard from the Parity team is that they do plan to have basically like hierarchical relay chains ultimately, right? So there might be a base layer relay chain that's like securing 100 chains, but then one of those like chains that's securing could itself be a relay chain. So you can have like you'll be able to have this kind of like computer science style downwards tree of like multiple layers. To be able to get like more parachains ultimately. And so I think that's their scaling strategy. I think the constraint right now is that I think there is kind of difficult computer science kind of problems when it comes to the number of like validators you have, and then how many chains can be secured by like some validator set. But I think this 100, I mean, that's going to like last a while. And there's also on both Kusama and Polkadot, there's always there's kind of this this kind of like a quality kind of like ongoing mechanism, right? Where kind of, because it's like competitive to get these slots, I think that, some new teams come in, maybe some teams that were there first might fall out and this kind of thing, right? So there's kind of this ongoing process to kind of refine kind of who it is that has the slots too.
Yeah, but isn't that also an issue with Polkadot? Because when you say that you can fall out, let's say I build something and I invest so much, we have all this liquidity, and then we don't win the next auction. So have they thought about that? What it will look like?
Well, I think the idea is that if you have traction and are providing a valuable service, then like you should like re-win the slot. But if you aren't, right, or like the team stops delivering, or who knows what, it becomes a ghost chain, then like it really shouldn't be occupying valuable like resources if it's like not something that's creating value and that the community believes in. I think these crowd loans are largely an expression of community support, right? Like which chains are at that the community believes in, that should have like a seat at the table.
Yeah, but it's still gonna be interesting to see because, like you say, there's 100 chains, but what if there's like 1,000 great projects with great? They still can only be 100, so that's going to be definitely something that the Polkadot community needs to figure out a good way. Maybe it's that you go to Kusama somehow in a smooth way, but yeah, that's something to keep in mind, of course.
And I think, of course, one other way that to relieve the pressure is that it's projects like ours, right? So like by deploying onto an existing parachain. You can still access, the ecosystem, the assets there, the users there, but you're not occupying a slot. I think, these slots are kind of a serious business. And it's like, I think it's, they're, I think that it's only kind of for like, larger infrastructure or kind of like, or more important projects. I think that would make sense to occupy a slot. Otherwise you could go on to like a platform oriented, like a parachain like ours.
Got it. Yeah, very interesting things. And when it comes to the different EVMs on Polkadot, because I know there are a couple, so how do you see that landscape? Is it mostly the same features? Is it something that Moonbeam does that other Polkadot EVMs don't do? How do you view that?
Yeah, I think that like we've obviously like not only doubled, we've like tripled down. Like we're just specialized like in this EVM. We've carried forward like the implementation of a lot of the features, along with Parity. So I think that's what we're known for. Like we're the guys who've done and gals that have done the EVM implementation. And but yeah, I think I know that some other teams are planning on incorporating these features. I'd say that for many of them, it's not the primary focus. It's more of a in like a list of features, right? So it's like, yes, and we have this too. So from our perspective, it's like, you have to kind of choose what to focus on, right? I would say that I think the thing that we came to realize is that the core kind of Ethereum implementation itself is one thing, but it's like all of these like surrounding integrations are like just as important and like do take for some of these teams that they're choosing like who to work with kind of thing. So I do think that this like surrounding all these tools and other things that are around the core are just as important as the core. And then of course there's this ecosystem network effect as well, I think, right, where if you're a DeFi protocol, you don't want to be the first to deploy somewhere, so it's kind of like because you depend on all these other things. So I think that was a big challenge that we had, is just how do we bootstrap this thing, and you almost have to get some collection of people to like all kind of agree to move at once, right? So that they can satisfy each other's needs, right? And I think that's, we're not going to be the only ones probably to do that, but that is like something that I think, and there's only so many, I guess, that like we'll be able to achieve that, I think, right? So.
Interesting. And when it comes to the parachain, I think people don't understand what's necessary there. So can you explain what does it take to be a parachain in terms of tokens? Like how much dollars is that in dollars? So the whole process. And I know that it is soon happening. So maybe you can explain also how people can participate and support you, for example, in that process.
Yeah, so I do think, and I mentioned a little bit, it is a bit of a unique process. So you have this scarce resource, you have these parachain slots that are going to get occupied by parachain teams. And yeah, maybe to answer your first question, also what goes into this, to have like a parachain, you need to have done this like substrate implementation, right, of like basically a full blockchain that's also kind of compatible like with the relay chains in question, right, Kusama or Polkadot. And so there's a process that teams need to go through in order to occupy one of these slots. And I think this was a very deliberate choice on the part of Parity, who were designing this, to say that instead of us deciding, okay, team A is going to get one, team B is going to get one, there's kind of this market process where there's an auction system. And it's open to anyone, it's permissionless, and basically the team that kind of has the winning bid, like at auction, is the team that gets to occupy the slot. So there is this kind of way for the market to express itself, saying, hey, like this, this team put up like the most amount of the relay chain asset, and so they get the spot. And so that's about to start. So that process happened and is kind of an ongoing process happening on Kusama, and that's about to start for Polkadot. So on basically November 11th is like when this first batch of the first basically slot will become available. That auction will start. Now, the winning bids on these things, like especially for the first ones, is pretty high. So there's this like separate mechanism. So basically, teams like generally don't have like enough
but sorry, before you go into this, I mean, I keep thinking there is like 10 is it that they're gonna release 10 to begin with, or because you said 100, but I heard 10 somewhere. Is it completely wrong, or they're gonna release 10 first?
So what they did on Kusama was that initially there was 5 that were made available initially.
Okay.
And then, but now there's like 11, I think, or 12. So they basically beyond the initial 5, then they start like a rolling sequence of like every so often, then there's a new one that comes on the market. So then you grow over time, basically how many are available. And so something similar is happening on Polkadot, where there's initially there'll be 5 that are made available.
5, okay.
I think that they want to kind of see, okay, is this, let's make sure the system's working okay, and then they'll start this process of, okay, maybe every couple weeks there'll be another one added. So it'll be like a rolling, ongoing process to get up to the full capacity.
And of course, the question is, so how much money is needed? How many tokens is needed?
Yeah, so I mean, the clearing price for these things from Kusama was pretty high, basically, right? I think that there's obviously a lot of interest in the project and in this. So I was going to mention that this also somewhat novel mechanism has been created to help teams bootstrap themselves into one of these spots and have one of these winning bids at auction. So that's something called a crowd loan. So the crowd loan, the idea is that instead of the team themselves coming up with the necessary, in this case, DOT for the Polkadot, auctions themselves, they can kind of engage the community and say, hey, like folks in our community, to their community, like help us, have a winning bid, like for this auction slot. And it's kind of done in a permissionless way and secure way where it's the funds are actually never in control of the team. It's basically they get funneled directly into one of these auction bids, and then if a successful crowd loan is run, then the team is generally giving like rewards back to their community supporters for having helped them get a slot. And so I think on Kusama, almost all of the the auctions have been won using this crowd loan mechanism, and it's going to be the same thing on Polkadot, that all the teams are running these crowd loans, and so it becomes kind of I guess a signal of the strength and of the belief of your community, right? Like the community is kind of like supporting one team versus another with their tokens to help vote them into like one of the slots.
And to clarify, it's staking, right? It's not that you send the money does not disappear; it's just staking.
That's right. So it's basically locked like for a duration of time. You get it back like after this lock. So yeah, I guess what I've heard it described as I mean, in some sense you're contributing something, but it's really the opportunity cost of you could have just staked it like directly on the relay chain to get to get rewards that way. So you're giving up this opportunity cost. Like that's kind of what you're giving up by supporting a project, basically.
It's more like voting in that sense. So let's say that you guys win that, and how long do you have the slot then? And when is it like re-election, or is it continuously that people need to keep staking and it changes in real time? How does that work?
Yeah, so it is, well, first of all, it's different on Kusama and Polkadot. So one of the things around Kusama is that everything happens faster, basically, on Kusama. That's like one of the differences. The code base is the same, but like the timing parameters are always faster on Kusama. So for Kusama, the maximum, and the team can decide actually like, how long they want to try to occupy one of these slots for. The maximum time on Kusama was 48 weeks. So just shy of 1 year. And so that's, the Moonriver parachain kind of went for a 48-week lease. And on Polkadot, it's 96 weeks. So shy of 2 years, basically. Like, the Moonbeam parachain is going for, this 96-week maximum kind of slot occupancy.
And so, but also we want to hear dollar amounts. How many? So how much do we need to stake to get you guys to 2 years? do you know approximately?
It's obviously it's just kind of speculation. We'll have to see like what the market kind of tells us. We do have this data from Kusama to look at. So on Kusama, I would say that. For the first, slots, they were going generally for around 200K KSM, which was a lot. I mean, that's like about 2% of the available Kusama supply, something like that.
So is that like 100 million, 200 million? What is that? 200K?
So what KSM is, I haven't looked recently. It's probably like 300 some odd dollars like each.
Let's see
So
KSM.
yeah.
So KSM right now is like, wow, it's 400. All right. So 400. Let me quickly. So 200. Bam, bam, bam. So it is 87 million. All right. So it was 87 million based on today's price for Kusama, and probably for Polkadot. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's times 5 or something. It's going to be very interesting anyway to see that what's needed. But in the community setting, it's not impossible. I mean, there are so many, especially in crypto, in this. I mean, people who are interested in this kind of thing. There are many whales with 1 million plus, and here you need 100 of them basically, and you have already what was needed for Kusama. So, it may sound a lot, but if you have a community, it's actually not that crazy to think, because people who are in this and they work here, I mean, they have the tokens to do it. So how do you view this? Like what? Is it crazy to you, or because to me, when we did if Kusama was cheaper, I mean, then it's just 40 million. So it seems that from a community perspective, it's not that much to stake for like a day. So do you find it reasonable, this amounts?
I still find it to be expensive. I mean, because I think that. But the thing is, as I mentioned, these slots will continue to come to market, like over the course of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see a world in which I'm sure that the clearing price at auction for these slots will go down like over time, because there's just more available slots. There's more supply in the market. But I think that some of the the initial slots are being occupied by some of the best teams. So I think that insofar as that's a way that people can get exposure then into the tokens of like those projects, you're getting kind of a lot of interest basically, right? So I think it's driving the price basically initially.
Interesting. Yeah, because we saw, for example, Avalanche yesterday announced that they're gonna have like $200 million fund for their community growth, and here it takes 87 to be in the Kusama. So I mean, of course, it's a lot, but for community, if you have a community, then it should be reasonable. And when it comes to the amount of, so you say it's gonna be 5, and do you know whether it's gonna be 10 soon, or it's still up to debate? They start with 5 and they don't really know when it's gonna.
I mean, again, like I think if you look at what happened on Kusama, it's a pretty good roadmap for what's going to happen on Polkadot. So there was an initial 5, there was some learning, some other things, some upgrades, and things based on the first 5. But then it's been resumed. There was another 5, and now I think we're even beyond that. It's into this like rolling period. So I'm sure it's going to be similar on Polkadot, where I think that there's the initial batch, maybe there'll be a second batch, and then it'll move into like a rolling rolling kind of system.
And so for you, what kind of work do you do day to day? What's the life of a Polkadot founder, Polkadot parachain founder? What's your morning routine?
Well, I mean, I would say that obviously, like we've been working on this thing for a while, and now with the Moonriver launch, that was took a lot. That was a very important milestone, and now. Entering into this like launch sequence for Moonbeam itself, that's obviously a very important milestone that's requiring a lot of focus for the team. But I do think that maybe unlike some other projects, we kind of do have these dual streams of execution, right? So it's kind of like our Moonriver network is kind of in time a little bit ahead of like Moonbeam. So there, a lot of the effort now is going into supporting teams that are deploying this infrastructure, like these things I was mentioning before, and then. The launch is like important for Moonbeam, but I'm sure then we'll follow in the footsteps there. Like all those same things that were done on
Moonriver,
like have to be done on Moonbeam, so as well.
But I think people are interested in you as a person also. Like you wake up, you sit I listen to this podcast. They ask about the morning routine, like business leader. Like what's your morning routine? So can you tell us what you do a normal day? You wake up, you get some coffee, you go to computer, and I guess you stay at the computer until the night, because that's what I do, and most people in cryptos.
I mean, it's pretty much like I'd say it's at this point it's probably 14 hours or so, like in front of the computer. A lot of calls. I mean, I've been called old fashioned because I like on these calls. Some people are like these days are like, oh well, let's just like do it over Telegram, but. I don't know. Maybe I'm old. It's like I just being on video with someone. I think you learn. It's all remote now, of course, but you kind of learn a lot about like a person, like when you're on video with them. So that's like an important important for me. Yeah, because I think sometimes with these teams, they get, it's like, it's not about the tech. I can read about the tech. It's like I want to get to know the people, basically, right? So, but yeah, so a lot of calls. Yeah, I think this like ecosystem building is like is like a labor intensive kind of process. You need to kind of just make sure to meet and give attention to the teams that want to make investment in into the network. So.
And I know you take a lot of calls because your audio and video quality is good. Because sometimes I do this interview, sometimes people come with a bad microphone, like it's echoing back and forth. So I was very pleased. As soon as you answered, I see that you know.
I'm in a temporary working space, so I have only my mobile things here, but I have a better setup at home. But yeah, you need a good quality mic, right? And that's and a better video camera. That helps a lot. Yeah.
And finally, in terms of organizing the team, what advice can you give to people watching us? Because many people that watch us, they also want to do something in crypto. They maybe want to start a project. Like, what is the organization behind Moonbeam? How do you coordinate team meeting, daily check-in? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, well, for one, I'd say that hiring is like extremely important, and this is I've come to this conclusion not it's basically by making like mistakes in the past, even, right? So like you kind of learn this over time, but I mean, I'm spending like a large part of my time on recruitment. I think my former kind of co-founder kind of used to joke that like the job of the CEO, he has two jobs: hire the right people and like don't run out of money, basically, like those two things. So I kind of think I think about like his words sometimes, that those are kind of the two most important things. So yeah, I mean, I think on the hiring side, like that's I mean, we just spend like a lot of time on that, and are pretty picky about like hiring. And so that's like definitely something that when I hear people say, well, I'm gonna like outsource it to like these people, or it's like, not like a small team, you should not be doing that, right? You need to like you need to be involved in the process. So that's definitely one thing. In terms of how we operate, I think this remoteness definitely kind of change. You really have to put like intentional effort into making sure people are like feeling connected and like on the same page. And I think so one strategy that we use, for example, is we do have I mean, we're 36 people now, so we're definitely have grown in size a bit, but twice a week we have like an all hands stand up, where like everyone, including myself, will kind of like report out like, here's kind of like what the things I did in the last few days, and here's like what I'm doing next. And it sounds like it's a little tedious like sounding, but it's an important part. I mean, it's part of our culture, and it's an important, I think, to encourage this kind of transparency so that people understand kind of what's happening, and and also feel some sense of responsibility. They have to get up in front of the whole company and then explain like what it is that they're doing. So I mean, that's a strategy that we've used. I do think you just have to be kind of intentional, right? Like, because it's easy, I think, in this remote world to just kind of hide behind, okay, I'm just gonna send a few Slack messages or what have you. I mean, you just need to like have these moments where the team is coming together to like continue to be engaged.
And one of the things that helped us a lot at Moralis is when we found GitLab Handbook. Do you know about that? The GitLab Handbook? I mean, GitLab, they just IPO'd at like 15 billion or something. And when we saw that, we were, wow, it's because they're open source and we're also doing open source. So we were like, let's check what they're doing. And we found that not only is their technology open source, all their organization is open source. So I can link you after the video, and all of you guys who are watching, you can Google GitLab Handbook, because they write exactly how they do remote work, how they use Slack, when it's time to meet, when meetings are unnecessary, when they're necessary, what developers should do, what DevOps should do, like how they do it, of course. But yeah, it's super helpful because they are also completely remote, like hundreds of people in this kind of programming tech company, completely remote. And we ourselves, we just found it a few weeks ago, but our mind is like, we found, because we've been thinking about these questions all the time. Should we do calls, a stand-up daily, or should we not do it? Because it's different time zones. For one person, it is 5 a.m. For another, it is 11 p.m. And we all need to do like a call together or should we do Slack, async? So we got a lot of answers from there. I can recommend you that, and all of you guys who are watching. But Derek, it was fantastic time having you here. A very enjoyable conversation. We learned a lot. Most importantly, very knowledgeable. What I want to say, very knowledgeable conversation with you and enjoyable. So what should people do if they want to get involved with Moonbeam?
Yeah, the thing I would kind of leave people with is that, I mentioned that we, this like Polkadot parachain, the season, if you want to call it that, auctions. Like these first auctions are starting shortly on November 11th. The Moonbeam Foundation will be running a crowd loan, to get support for us, the project, to occupy one of these initial slots. So I mean, that would be a great way to get involved. In this crowd loan, that means that you'll become engaged with the network, and there's become part owner of the network. So I mean, that would be the thing I would ask for is that would be a great way to get engaged.
Absolutely, guys. Go and get some DOT and go support Moonbeam, because these guys, they're truly doing something revolutionary. So we wish you good luck, Derek, and hope to speak soon after you have some nice announcements with the launch. We hope to hear about the... So when is that finished, by the way? When do you know whether you have Parachain or don't? Is there any timeline?
Yeah, so in these first 5 slots, there's one per week, 4 or 5 weeks then, basically. So we'll know then after week 1, did we win the first one or not? And if not, then you kind of roll into the second one and so on.
Man, it's he's gonna be nervous the last week, the guys. Perfect. And which day does it start? This whole...
So November 11th is when it starts.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's about a week from tomorrow, I think. So from the day we're recording this, at least, yeah.
Got it. Perfect, guys. Smash the like. See you all very, very soon. And thanks, Derek.
All right. Thanks for having me.